my whole life up to this moment had been a fleeting dream, and now I was awake in a nightmare. But mine was just one story among many.
Nathan, I understand it was your baby, no? You kind of came up with it. I think, was it kind of because something got blocked, you couldn't kind of get to do something that you were going to do? I don't know if it was a short film or something that you couldn't do, and that kind of made you realize we've got to make the most of our time.
I think so. I mean, I was supposed to do, I think like everybody else in the film game, I was supposed to do this feature, and then obviously the investors pulled out because of COVID. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do? I'm not going to write a feature in a month. It's just not going to be good. But I thought to myself, then I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I was like, maybe I'll just do a short. He's like, why would you do that? He goes, you've done that a million times. He's like, think bigger, dude. So you got all the time in the world right now. So I was like, well, I bet I could get together some amazing filmmakers, right? And have them write a short that's like anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes. That would be really, really strong and powerful. It's a little bit easier to write 15 minutes than it is to write an hour and a half, right? So then I was like, okay, great. Now I have to find these people. So it was probably a 3-month process of hitting people up that I really liked on Instagram, their work, calling agents from all over the place, talking to friends, having conversations with different directors. And a lot of people were, because, nobody really knew who I was. And I was sort of offering this movie to do. And at the height of COVID, when in the US, nobody was allowed out. I mean, you weren't allowed to go out, you had to stay inside. And for me, it was very important that we had a really a film that looked like it was shot outside of COVID. We didn't want to shoot on a phone. We didn't want to shoot on Zoom. I wanted everything to look really high end. And that means you had to have those cameras in the house with you. So that was a whole other thing. So it was really kind of difficult to sort of find the people to be able to pull this all off, and that had the imagination and, were prolific enough to actually write these stories and create these, these great moments. So it was a 3-month process. And finally, I got everybody together, and I sort of created this overall narrative. I said, these are certain things parameters you have to follow, like no zombies, no vampires. I wanted to keep it sort of as real as possible, and sort of to have this idea of a virus or a pandemic, so to speak, sort of in the background of the stories, where it was more character driven, and that sort of came out. So yeah, I got really lucky. Our associate producer, Sophie Gold, introduced me to Bobby and Zach. And I think you guys kind of were, I think, the 3rd or 4th directors that I spoke with. And to be honest with you, these 2 guys were like so gung-ho from the beginning. It was in a great collaboration between the 2 of them, not only with the movie, but throughout, even up until now, with us getting the film out, getting the film sold. It was a really long process, but a really fun and one that we didn't even realize that we were able to get in these festivals either. That wasn't the point. Was to try to get it out while the pandemic was happening, like turn around real quick, and it didn't. And the beauty of that, the silver lining of that, was we got into Screamfest, we premiered at Fright Fest, we got into IFI Horror, and it's been a great ride because all the directors that all spoke on Zoom together with me, because we never met in person, all got
none of you had met before, but none of you
ever. I didn't even see Bobby until like a year later. I think we just spoke on the phone. And then finally we all met up half of us met at Fright Fest, the other half met at Screamfest. And it was just like, kind of like a love fest.
And Nathan, for some reason, he was like, oh, I thought you were like 5'5". I thought you were this little guy.
I showed up at Freak Show at Fright Fest, and I was like, that guy is huge. But he's like 6'7". It was crazy because all you see is like these media. You don't know what anybody looks like. Yeah. So that's the long answer to your question. But yeah, it was something that, I really wanted to do something that was cool and relevant. I didn't want to waste the time of just sitting around. And a lot of people did take that time to sort of mellow out. But for me, I just would have gone crazy. And I think it's one of the things that actually helped me through the whole COVID thing, if you will, was to just collaborate with these, amazing filmmakers and just really create some art and something like really beautiful now that we can share. And, with these really great stories that sort of are going to live forever.
Yeah. And I mean, Bobby and Zach, I imagine, I don't know how it all came to fruition, but I imagine you jumped on board pretty quickly, because the kind of filmmaking that you did in kind of the Houses of October, Bill, those kind of things, it really does feel like a very much kind of the short that you, especially the short that you do in the film, but the whole kind of the genesis of the whole film really does feel like the stuff that you've done before, no?
Sure. No, it wasn't. I think the thing that kind of we were worried about is that, or we were kind of bummed at the time, it was around March. And so Zach and I have worked almost 3 years on A Wicked Tale, which we were supposed to shoot last summer. And like everybody else, it got shut down. And so we just didn't know what that next year was going to look like. But we're the same as Nathan. We don't sit on our hands.
Yeah.
So if you give us that time, we try to figure out how we're going to do this. And then it was this very serendipitous call. You know, it kind of came out of nowhere. Didn't know Nathan. And at first we were a little hesitant because when you come from found footage, you know, and we're making these moves into the feature game, you want it to look, you know, there's that difference, right? In that found footage look, and then you want something very pristine and lit correctly. And so now we're presented again an opportunity, which is great, but we have zero crew. There's not going to be lighting. There's not going to be a great camera. How can we do this, you know, our way and try to make this work? And Zach and I always try to work backwards, and story's always first for us. We'll figure out the rest. I have small children, and you know, I've been doing, you know, 80,000 miles probably a year, flying to meetings and doing this. And you don't want to be gone on those very impressionable years. You know, and sometimes work, no matter what your occupation is, takes especially dads away sometimes. So, you know, this quarantine was somewhat of a blessing to be around them in very formidable years. And then when Zach and I kept talking, he's like, well, how do we do this? I need to include the family if we do this. And maybe there's this Lord of the Flies approach where we kind of looked out the water and said, what if, you know, there's a newborn baby with mom and dad are dead? Because at the time, the elderly were just the major concern, right? 65 and up, that was the risk. But what if the virus has mutated from, you know, in different ways, that variations that it does throughout the movie? But in our story, if the age limit went all the way down to 12, what does that look like? And to me, then all of a sudden you have Emerald Forest, Lord of the Flies, that kind of thing, where there are parentless kids all over the place. And that to me is terrifying. Maybe it's just being a parent, but that scared me. That really bothered me. And then, but like we've seen in movies and stories before us, one of the kids will step up. They will do what they have to do to survive. And that's always just kind of interesting to see. The challenge being that my kids were 5 years old and 3 years old at the time. And it was a good idea on paper, and then we're like,
that's what I was going to ask you.
Are they going to listen?
Because I imagine you wrote this thing without actually consulting them or kind of talking to them, and I imagine maybe not to your wife either.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that the Lord of the Flies approach, and then it actually translates into real life, because especially on my end, I'm sitting there writing these scenes, and I'm just treating, I know that the kids are going to be acting them, and I've met them before, but I'm just treating them like normal actors and writing, you know, and Bobby was probably getting my pages going, what in the hell are you going to make?
At least they're going to do that, yeah.
But then they pulled it off. I mean,
they did a fantastic job. Yeah, honestly, they really did. Yeah.
Yeah. So we definitely put a lot on their plate, and maybe that was a good thing, to just kind of, you know, raise the bar and be so frantic. You know, as Nathan's saying, we got to get, you know, I got to see these pages, you know, in 3 days. And so we'd just be writing these scenes and going back and forth, without really probably thinking like, can we send them through this mud, and can we have them like running away from these guys and getting in this boat and all?
I gotta say, when I got your pages, I was like, I don't know how they're gonna do this, because the turnaround time, when I spoke to everybody, I kind of only gave them, I think it was almost like up to 2 weeks or maybe even a week just to write these scripts, because I wanted to be able to talk to them about it, you know. And again, the idea was to get these done relatively quickly so we could probably get it on demand and get it out during the quarantine. But they got me these pages, and I was, you know, and realizing how young his kids were and seeing what they actually had to do. Let me tell you, when James and I got the movie, we were blown away.
This was an opportunity that presented itself that to me was a family project. I couldn't have done it without them. My wife was an incredible help. She's a still photographer. And then she also, like, it was just our core unit filming. And so when I was done with it, like in my head, I was like, I'm still not going to put them at the forefront. I don't want their exposure. They're too young. We all know how the child actor thing turns out. It's usually not great, right? So I wanted to make sure I was very careful with that. And then the more and more we were telling the story, my daughter's understanding of everything was, that was the most interesting part. And so it started to more and more feel okay, because she was learning the process, even though at a small age. I'll never forget is, I mean, I don't have a script supervisor. I don't have a crew. So I'm zoned in. I've got tunnel vision on what I have to accomplish. But even my daughter, we shot out of sequence. And she said, Dada, I have mud on my shoes, but we didn't have mud on our shoes for this. And I was like, oh my God,
Keeping you on your
you
toes,
understand continuity. Like, this is crazy, but that was super helpful because I didn't see it. I was in a different place. And so things like that, she started to learn the process. She, after we finished this, she started to get really into, we made stop motion movies. There's an app for that makes it pretty easy. So she would sit and build this set and take Legos and do this. And so it was really neat to see from her side. She's very creative. She likes to craft. But for her to get to see what Dada does for a living was really, really neat. So my concerns about the privacy, I started to become a little bit more open about it because it felt like camp or something, and it felt like an educational experience for them. So I don't feel as much that way. And for the record, before, if anybody, I'm not a bad father. They did not see the movie that you saw. There's maybe things she saw she didn't really see. I've got this crocodile, remote control crocodile, like robot that was in the water for her. She didn't see. Okay. Right. So I was very, very careful about that. There's also an alternate ending. She thought we were filming Sleeping Beauty. Yeah. That's what she.
I mean, at the same time, what we with every film, like The Shining, I mean, the kid didn't even know it was filming a horror movie. They don't see it like a game anyway. So even what we see, yeah.
Nathan did
you have to do that.
Flip her a copy. Nathan sent it to her, so she's got it.
What? Oh, what? The Shining?
No, our movie. The
oh no. Yeah, that's not happening. Like, there's a whole scene. Like, I have lightsabers and I saved the day and kiss mom, and like that's what they saw.
Wait a second. When do we get to see that?
You guys aren't seeing that.
You're carrying the most dangerous virus, the truth.
Something that I'm really curious about is whenever I watch anthology films. I mean, you mentioned before that you had quite a few rules set out when you brought all the different directors on. I prefer the anthologies to kind of have this link that links them all together. What were your specific criteria that you set out to the different filmmakers to make sure that they didn't tell the same story, but that they did tell stories that would kind of follow on, and people would kind of say, okay, yeah, they do all kind of link together, and they'll keep you pulled into the film for the 90, 100 minutes?
Sure. Yeah. So the idea was to obviously do a movie that was centered around like a virus that had hit, around the world. Again, we wanted that to be in the background. I didn't want it to be the forefront of any of the stories. I wanted it to stay in this horror thriller world, but I didn't want anybody to turn into zombies or vampires or sort of go down that road again, like I was saying.
Yeah.
A lot of the rules were, you had to shoot in the house that you were in or the location you were in. You had to use the people that you were with. It had to be on a 4K camera. We made sure that it was sort of a first come, first serve basis of what the ideas were. A couple of people had come back to me with a story. I was like, well, somebody's already doing something similar to that. So I started to have the directors give me 5 ideas that they liked. And then I would choose one that sort of wasn't similar to anyone else's, or something I was like, oh, interesting, we can link this one to another. And sort of, at the end of the day, when I thought was going to be the story and how I was going to link them all together, when I put them all together the way I had it in my mind, it just didn't feel right. It felt a little clunky. So then I sort of switched the order of them all and washed it down. And I probably did it about 5 times. And then when I finally got it, I had to have people reshoot certain things in the film, like, dialogue that they were speaking about that linked, Bobby's film to El Paso, or, the other film to the, and then some I already knew we were going to, like the 5G film that links to It's Inside, because you see that picture of him on the wall. And the beauty of all that was, we got it all done, got it locked and loaded, sent it to Bobby and Zach. And I don't know what it was. I remember being on the phone and Zach had said something, and you guys might want to chime in on this, but that ending with the kids was not part of the story at all.
Hey, spoiler alert.
Oh, whoops.
How was the festival experience been, taking something that everyone's kind of been experiencing, no confinement? How has that kind of played out at festivals? And I think, Bobby, you even took your kids to one or two of the festivals now to celebrate. No? So how's that played out?
It's been, I mean, for us, I mean, again, I think it was like that extra line, you know, silver lining for us. And when we all got to meet, for me, it was great to be able to see in the theater, but I also just love to meet everybody and for the filmmakers to actually see what they did, all the connective tissue, all the hard work they put in on the screen. But I think the beautiful thing about it was a lot of people were like, oh, I don't really want to go see a movie about COVID. You know what I mean? And
that was the reason I asked you, yeah.
Right. But when they came out of it and all the reviews said, they're like, this is not that movie. We were really blown away with these stories and what these directors were able to pull off. And we were so engaged with each one of the stories with sort of that idea of what's happening in the background. And I think taking what they, this idea that, oh, this is the time we're in, I don't really want to see this. They, it changed their whole viewpoint on it. They actually were really engaged with the story, loved it. And all that stuff, all the rest of the stuff was out the window, and it really became like a film that everybody kind of fell in love with, So it was nice to know that. That's why I kind of wanted everything in the background. I knew nobody wanted to see that. We don't want to sit there and live in the world we're living in on screen, right? We want to be transported, and each one of the stories does transport you. So I think that's what everybody got really, really engaged, and the reception was great. I mean, we sold out at Fright Fest, Scream. We did, we had the great numbers there, and the response to the filmmakers, seeing everybody walk up to them, talk to them, looking at the reviews, the positive reviews from everyone, it just makes me so happy to see that, and that, everybody that put their heart and soul into this is getting like the accolades they deserve.
Yeah. I think if it had been one movie, if each one of those had been a feature, I think you would have run into the COVID fatigue. But because you got to change styles and characters and settings, it didn't feel like a COVID movie. I think that was just a benefit of the anthology way to.
And I think it's a beautiful showcase as well to show what people can do left to their own devices. Now, I mean, I've certainly learned that over the last couple of years, and I imagine you as well. Even having kind of done a lot of kind of guerrilla type films, no, Bobby and with the House of October building, that was kind of very left to your own devices. You came up with this, and kind of, I imagine you've learned even more things over the last couple of years. What new things have you learned that you didn't learn when you were making the House of October films, that you didn't kind of realize that maybe you can use in the future?
Yeah, the introduction. So because I didn't have like a Red or an Alexa at home, I was trying to figure out how we're going to shoot this thing where it doesn't look. We don't want any zoom looks. We don't want any phone look. So what I did is so there's a lot of drone shots. So I spent a lot of time, I've archived a lot of stuff and really enjoyed, just flying drones in general the past couple of years, to the point that my wife's probably really annoyed in family vacations. But what's nice about it that I hadn't thought about it this way, but I needed something we have a motorcycle chase. The kids are running through the forest. I need a steady cam for the most part, or we don't want the shaky cam, which everybody bitches about anyway for found footage, right? And this isn't found footage. So how do we fix this within our budgets, within, what we have at home? And so what I did is I 3D printed a handle around the drone. So, and it also holds the remote at the top, and it's just a 3D printed handle that acts as a steady cam, because what people forget is the drone is great and has this nice gimbal and keeps it steady up in the air. That's what it's for, to resist wind. Yeah. But if I was to sit and run with it, it does the same thing. It's just like flying. So you don't have to actually fly. So a lot of the movie I shot handheld with the drone to keep it very, very steady. And so that's what, we've said this in the past, but it's very true. And I think it was Kevin Smith said, you're most creative when your back's against the wall. And I get that. If you don't have this, we'll fix it in post mentality because you don't have the money for it, you better fix it now. Yeah. And so how do we do that? And then you come up with these creative ways that, was this great hack to me to be able to use and still give a little bit of that feel without being herky jerky.
Yeah, because I remember you telling me, man, I don't know if I can do this because all I have is the phone.
Yeah.
And then a couple of days later, you're like, I got this. And I was like,
yeah, and my wife has this 5D, but it only shoots HD, and we wanted the rules were 4K. So I was like, how are we going to figure this out? Basically with no budget and no crew.
That's a conversation I've been having quite recently. I think that was a reason why a lot of the 80s movies went down so well and were so great, was the fact that we didn't have all of these luxuries, and it was like, what the hell do we do? How do we get out of this situation? I don't know if you've seen on Netflix the movies that made us. And you
Yeah.
just
Oh, yeah.
realize all of their backs were against, but they weren't against the wall. They were against about 10 walls. And it was like, how the hell do we get out of this? And Die Hard is the best example. Look how fantastic that came out. And this is the same.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, that's, there's different definitions for movie magic, but that goes into it. It's that there's a lot of luck that's involved. And I think you shoot as much as you can, and you hope when you get to that edit bay, there are those moments you can use, because the connective tissue is so important, and it might not be everything that you thought of on the day of shooting. And you just try to capture as much as you can. And if you're lucky enough, you can have a couple of the reshoots, but all in all, you better be prepared, and you better have a lot of footage.
Yeah, definitely. So listen, just to finish off, and I don't want to keep you too long, I want to talk a little about the future, because I know that you both, well, all three of you, said that just before COVID set in, you both had projects that you were pretty much ready to get the ball rolling. No, are those coming into place nicely now, or we still got to wait a bit of time to get before you can get into production with those?
I'll let you go, Bobby. Go ahead.
Yeah, Zach and I just got brought on. We're doing rewrites on a horror film for 2022 right now, which has been nice, kind of this interim. And then the plan is for next summer to be, May, to be shooting a new feature that we can't fully announce yet.
Right.
But yes, things should all be back on track.
Producer hat says before May we'll be shooting that.
Say that again?
We'll be shooting that before May of next year.
Yeah. Well, then get moving.
Brilliant. What about Nathan? I mean, it was a short, I think, that you were going to get into.
No, it was a
into-
feature that I had.
It was a
financed.
feature. Oh, right, sorry. No, I
Yeah,
thought that,
yeah.
I read that you had a short film in production, so you were going to direct a feature film.
I did a short recently that I finished, that's sort of out in the world, because ideally I wanted to do a film that was part of Isolation, and then it became a real big beast, and I thought, I'm better served serving the filmmakers in this story, in this film, than trying to make one of my own. So I ended up not doing that. But yeah, it's
Well,
the same.
real quick though, too. I mean, Nathan's captaining this whole project was so huge. I mean, because he literally was juggling, egos is the wrong word, but it's people that are very passionate. And to try to make that all mesh together, I think he did an incredible job. Like I said, we didn't all meet till London, and which was this amazing time. We all bonded real fast, and all of us had come from all different walks of life, but we had this central figure in Nathan. And I think that was huge for us, because the movie wouldn't have come together the way it did without him.
I took that for granted, because I was actually the only person that met Nathan, and so I figured Nathan's just making the rounds, meeting everybody, getting things from. I mean. So when we ran into them in London, I'm just like, hey, what's up, buddy? And everybody else is like, you're Nathan. And I'm like, wait, no one else has met him?
Yeah, I thank you, Bobby.
We
That's
did
very
it off a hard drive at the peak of COVID. I don't even know where we in gloves and masks. I can't even remember.
I was like, throw it to me.
Yeah.
Oh, but I can imagine with it. I mean, all these so many different filmmakers working at the same time, going in different directions. It can't have been an easy task at all to kind of keep them all going into more or less the vision that you had there.
You're asking these. I want to say hired, but I got these filmmakers together because I really like their work. And so as a filmmaker myself, you have to put that sort of aside, and you have to what's best for the vision of the story. So you want to be able to let them their POV needs to shine. Right. So it's okay, so it's kind of juggling this idea of making sure that the narrative makes sense and all of this, but also, you really want it to be theirs. You know what I mean? And so it wasn't the hard part, but with 9 different stories, 11 different filmmakers constantly talking to them and making sure, that it fits our narrative, but also that they're proud of the work they've done, really speaks to them and is part of their canon later in life. You want to be, to me, that was really, really important. I was never trying to push my ideas or anything on them. If anything, was just to serve the story. And we had a lot of conversations, and together, I honestly had the best time working with everyone, and they were all so fantastic. And I feel like I made 11 different best friends in COVID.
Really good to speak to you guys. Take care, and I wish you the best of luck with the film when it comes out.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Howard.
All
Great
right,
to meet you, man.
take care.
Thank
Look after yourself. Take care.